We are back with another reflection on the daily Vedantic. One of my favorite aspects of this philosophy, I think I mentioned in the last episode, around how 1 in 10,000 find these concepts interesting. But for those that do, we find nearly nothing as interesting as these concepts that have to deal with the biggest questions there are. Existence, reality, truth, ourselves. And within this philosophy, one of my favorite aspects about this recognition that 1 in 10,000 will find it interesting is that there is no importance placed on converting anyone to this philosophy. This philosophy is actually quite explicit in saying that there are as many paths to God as there are people on earth. It's very different than the Roman Catholic household that I grew up in. It's even more different than the Baptist church that was a few blocks down the street from us. This is a radical departure from the spirituality I grew up with as a Roman Catholic, raised in a Roman Catholic household. My family still goes to church here in LA every Sunday, and we love our church. It's just a matter of interpretation when Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. None shall see the Father except through me. It just comes down to an interpretation of who is the me. Is it 5'4" Nazarene Jesus? Or is it Christ, God, saying, none come to God except through God? Which makes perfect sense to a Vedantin like me. Krishna says basically the same thing in the Gita when he says, take refuge in me alone. But that capital M, me, to a Vedantin, within this philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, saying this is the symbolic embodiment of God. Take refuge in God. Not this 5'5" character named Krishna. And the same is said for Christ. He's speaking as God. That doesn't take a stretch of interpretation, given that nearly all of the 30,000 sects of Christianity view Christ as both human and God, fully man and fully God. But there is this contrast between Western approaches to divinity, to spirituality, where you are implored to go out and convert others, and an Eastern approach, a Vedantic approach of you will do more damage by trying to force your opinion or views on others than you will do any help to them in their spiritual path. And I know this from my experience growing up, where you have people or friends that had such a bad, sometimes traumatic experience with in-group, out-group dynamics of Christianity that it probably set them back a decade, 2 decades, maybe a couple lifetimes from a spiritual path, because the attempt was there to force it. It was so forced, thrust upon them. And what happens when a philosophy is there for the taking, where you can treat it, you're encouraged to treat it like a buffet. Take the parts you like, leave the rest you don't. Swami will say often, if that concept doesn't speak to you, leave it on the shelf. Vedanta, also known as Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles, that's one of the principles. It's one of my favorite principles. Attach, you lose. Detach, you gain. Or one that I mention often on the podcast project, which is love is seeing no otherness in the world. Wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. The world is opposites. These are all just these eternal principles that this philosophy offers, and some might hit you like a ton of bricks. Some might not have any meaning to you whatsoever. Take the ones that are useful, leave the ones that aren't. The exact opposite to growing up Catholic, where you are told, hilariously, using very similar language, but the opposite direction, do not be a buffet Catholic. You can't just take what you like and leave the rest. If you want part of it, you got to take it all. And one of our duties in life is to go and convert, to evangelize. What happens when a philosophy has no evangelizing, where you make it accessible? This podcast project is just a simple mission. Make this philosophy accessible to those that seek it. There's no drive towards numbers. There's no drives towards convincing anyone of anything. I don't know, I rarely ever entertain a debate around these principles, because if it is just mere journalistic curiosity and it's not someone seeking truth, and they're just like collecting concepts, then it's not the intention for someone to really transform themselves through truth, or to take to it because, man, that's speaking to me. They're just taking to it to collect a bunch of concepts, maybe to satisfy some curiosity, or just basically like a 5-year-old poking a worm to see what it'll do. That is very different than a qualified student that maybe 5 minutes into hearing about the philosophy, or maybe 5 years into reading it on their own, is saying to themselves, whoa, there's something there. And there's a genuine interest to see what is that something. And when you have that take it or leave it aspect of someone walking by seeing nothing there, someone walking by and saying, whoa, what is that something that I sense over there? It's the difference between overpowering and empowering. You can submit somebody, overpower them, pin them to the ground, leave them with no option. In-group, out-group dynamics of you won't belong, you'll be kicked out of the community if you don't recite these words in this specific order and get in line with our philosophical, religious views. You can overpower them. But what you ultimately do is disempower them. The power is external. And what is forced is not forceful. It's another eternal principle within this philosophy. What is forced is not forceful, versus empowering, where the power is within that individual, driven by their own pursuit, not carrot or stick driving a donkey 1,000 miles as a tool, as an instrument to get more people into the church, to get more donations, to get more validation on your own beliefs. Instead, it is this recognition of, wow, you are so powerful. Your potential, your capacity as a human, not a donkey, is so powerful. I don't want to F with that. When you are empowered towards the higher, towards your community, towards service, towards duty and obligation, when you are empowered instead of overpowered towards it, when you and your capacity is full of force, there is nothing more powerful. And in that recognition, there is a conscious choice towards empowering individuals instead of overpowering individuals, towards the 1 in 10,000 that cultivates the capacity to see the end in the beginning and becomes a lighthouse for themselves, their family, their communities, versus getting a bunch of donkeys walking in the same direction with carrots, sticks, but no internal force. There are admittedly benefits of being a part of a big army, whether it's fighting for truth or not, because the bigger the army, maybe the more chances, more odds that you'll win. But if the pursuit is truth, then maybe you choose something other than a big army. So if the pursuit is to win, then maybe the choice is the big army, the big community, what those around you might parrot or say. But if the pursuit is truth, it might feel lonely at first until you find your community that's also in pursuit of that truth. And people DM me all the time saying that that community can and should exist online as well as in person. And I know what it's like to settle for the online version, the online lectures, the forums, the Instagram accounts, the DMs, before I could find it and helped create it here in LA. So if you're starting with the online community, feel free to shoot me those DMs all day long, but know that truth is a quality game. Quality of the questions, quality of the reflection, quality of someone willing to sit with not knowing, to sit potentially alone, isolated, misunderstood. It is not a quantity game. Quantity of views, quantity of people that validate your opinion, quantity of people to your left or right in some huge convention hall. It is a quality game, and there is no better quality for a person that I know of than a person that is empowered. That is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.